Hey everyone, it's Lindsay Rhodes, and I've got a new podcast, the NFL Road Show. Fun and kind of nerdy conversation about the NFL every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I've got some amazing guests that are joining me. I'll be breaking the huddle with the top stories, previewing games. We'll get you set for the weekend fantasy with our Fantasy Friday episodes, and we'll answer some of your questions as well. So subscribe to the NFL Road Show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
What is up, Hardwood Knocks listeners? I am Dan Favalli coming at you actually with my fantastic co-host Adam Frommel in just a few seconds. We're going to be doing our awards picks, and Adam will take us through the whole spiel very shortly. I just wanted to introduce what's going to be our Boston Celtics look-ahead guest, which will come after our awards picks. You can look for the timestamp in the description of this pod or one of the tweets. Alex Kungu, you can follow him on Twitter at Kungu_NBA. That's at KUNGO_NBA. Does a great job following and covering the Celtics on Twitter and basketball at large. Seriously, I couldn't recommend his Twitter to follow enough. But that's really all I have to say because we're going to get into a normal intro shortly. Let's hop to it.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of Hardwood Knocks. This is Adam Frommel here with my co-host Dan Favalli, and the 2020-21 NBA season is just around the corner. It is so close. We are just over 24 hours away. We can see it, we can feel it, we can taste it. We are excited for it. We are going to be previewing it via some award selections today. We're going through all of the NBA's major awards, meaning Executive of the Year, Coach of the Year, Sixth Man of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, Rookie of the Year, Most Improved Player, and MVP, of course. Before we get into that, a shout out to our sponsors, betonline.ag and Indeed. You will be hearing from them shortly, as always. And then, Dan, how's it going today?
I'm doing well, Adam. How are you doing? I just interrupt before you can even answer, it's going to be the regular season when this podcast is released, like the official regular season. Or maybe it won't be. No, it won't be. But anyway, regular season basketball is coming. This is being released the day before regular season basketball starts. It really just means because this is being released on a Monday, folks, when there are no games, you should have all the time in the world to listen and download and review and rate and subscribe to this podcast. How are you doing,
even
Adam?
Listen twice, leave 2 ratings, like whatever works.
Yeah, juice the numbers. Like get on multiple phones, download the episodes. Come on, help us out here.
Yeah, we want you to inflate our numbers as much as the Charlotte Hornets are going to inflate LaMelo Ball's rookie stats.
Wow. A lot of Michael Carter-Williams stuff going on in there.
Could be. We'll get to that pretty soon.
How are you doing, though? You're good?
I'm pretty good. Yeah, it's always a fun time when the season is right around the corner. Even in this weird condensed offseason where everything has just been packed so close together that all of the projects and podcasts and whatnot that we typically do have been a little bit more stressful than usual. Like, I feel like we've just tried to cram so much into this short time period, and I hope it's worked. It's just been a lot.
I mean, it has definitively not worked perfectly. I think that's been pretty clear. Our team look-ahead series is going to leak probably until the middle of January, so that's just the status of this type of offseason.
I'm impressed with myself that I cut off the Crystal basketball grades for NBA math on Tuesday night and managed to release all of the team's grades by the end of Thursday.
I would like to see how many followers you lost on NBA math for tweeting 1,000 times.
It was net neutral. I was following it because I was curious for the same reason, and it definitely went down and went back up, and then went down and went back up. But we needed to give each team its time in the spotlight, even if that was about 3 seconds.
Well, the discussion on those rankings will be coming. Those are forthcoming, folks, so you can wait with bated breath, and we promise you won't die whilst you wait. Let's talk some awards, though. How about you take us through this, since you mandated the awards order that we were going to talk about these in?
Well, we did argue about the award order a little bit because we wanted to rank them
insofar as we ever argued. Yes,
right. We wanted to start with the least interesting and finish with MVP because it's MVP. And then Dan decided that he doesn't find Defensive Player of the Year particularly interesting. So even though it's maybe the second biggest award, I would say, we moved it down in the pecking order. So
I'd be way more interested in the award if I knew that Frank Ntilikina was going to play 30 minutes a night.
I would be way more interested in the award if it wasn't always given to a big man or a really good versatile wing defender, and it was instead graded relative to the rest of the position. Just if Marcus Smart or Patrick Beverley garnered more serious consideration on a yearly basis because they're so much better than the rest of the players at that position. That's how I kind of want to see it. Just like be a relative award rather than a who provides the most value award.
I could see that. Marcus Smart would certainly appreciate that, and he deserves
This is our case for having a Best Defender award in addition to a Defensive Player of the
Year. That would
award.
confuse the hell out of so many people. And look,
well, it's like the NFL does their bullshit like Offensive Player of the Year.
Yeah, who cares about MVP? NFL awards?
Right.
Can you name the last 5 Offensive of the Year rookies?
Oof, that would be an interesting challenge. I'm not prepared for that.
Stop disproving my notion that Defensive Player of the Year is uninteresting by the fact that we're spending so much time on talking about it before we're even supposed to talk about it.
Anyway, we're going to start with the least interesting award, which is Executive of the Year. You know, no disrespect to those front office men and women who make the decisions to build these rosters, but like we care about the players a little bit more, I think.
Yeah, and as quick background, we're doing this as I approached it as this is who I think is going to end up deserving the award. I wasn't necessarily predicting who might win. I tried to do that and blend them, but in the case of MVP, like I feel like my top choice is very clearly my second choice makes more sense, and we filled this out with 3 spots for each award, with the exception of MVP, which we give 5 because we could probably even talk about 10 players at that one and just go on. So. Executive of the Year, my ballot went as follows. James Jones of the Phoenix Suns, Sam Presti of the Oklahoma City Thunder, and Neil O'Shea of the Portland Trailblazers. I feel like 2 of these guys are not receiving enough due for the offseason. James Jones is one of them. I was not happy with the Jalen Smith pick. I would have went with Devin Vassell or Tyrese Halliburton there. I'm going to continue to bang the drum that. Imagine what Halliburton could have become learning under Chris Paul for a couple seasons.
And Devin Booker.
Yeah. Or playing alongside both of them in hybrid guard lineups. Still, you traded for Chris Paul, you signed Jay Crowder, and like the moves you made on the margins, bringing back Javon Carter, signing Langston Galloway, getting Etuan Moore, I just really like those. Even bringing back Saric, and I'm sure he was part of the decision to play Dario Saric as a 5 in the bubble and basically turn him into what feels like a backup center now. So we need to give James Jones his due. And look, some of it, I'm willing to give him slight benefit of the doubt with regard to his Smith pick because of what Cameron Johnson turned into. And we all just, destroyed that pick in the moment. Sam Presti's case is obvious to me. He had a trillion first-round picks, and I think he spotted also the market inefficiency of very few teams are, whether you want to say trying or organically, going to be so terrible, and he's leaning into it. There's a chance they're still too good unless they move Hill, Ariza, Horford, or sit them, but they've been on that track, and I think it was smart. This was a smart time to hit the reset button. And then Neil O'Shea was the one that I thought maybe wasn't getting enough credit, and the Blazers had a really good offseason. Just the additions of Derek Jones Jr., Robert Covington makes so much sense. People aren't like high on bringing back Melo, and I guess you could argue the fit is combustible, but I kind of like it. And the fact that this team has so much wing depth now, and then you pick up a Harry Giles, which really makes your front court so much more dynamic. We're talking about once Collins is healthy, you could play him, Nurkic, or Giles at the 5. Even lineups with Melo and Giles in the front court where Melo might defend like the 5 in that. And we've seen a little bit of that in the preseason because Tara Bowen Biggs alerted me to it on Twitter because I asked her to while we recorded a podcast if it ever happened. I thought these 3 teams had really nice off seasons. It does seem like the Thunder might be the favorite to win this just because of how they went about their rebuild. But I really think that James Jones and Neil O'Shea and their staff obviously just did a hell of a job this offseason.
I was really close to having Mitch Kupchak of the Charlotte Hornets in my top spot just because he drafted Grant Riller. But then I decided that would be like a little bit too homerific. So my ballot
especially
ended up
post Gordon Hayward contract, maybe.
Yeah, that kind of negated it. If it hadn't been for that deal, Kupchak would have been in my number 1 spot. Let's just say that. But yeah, I had James Jones at number 1. I had Travis Schlenk of the Atlanta Hawks at number 2, and I had Sam Presti at number 3. My justification for Presti isn't really any different than yours. With James Jones, I think that Executive of the Year probably should focus more on those moves around the margins than it does, and it tends to so often go to the executive who brings in the marquee star that is just a franchise-altering move, and that's Chris Paul this offseason. Like, I don't think we can overemphasize just how much it does for the culture in Phoenix, which is an organization that hasn't been to the playoffs in roughly forever, in addition to that on-court product. This is a really good team, and when it is a Western Conference playoff squad, it's going to be obvious how much that Chris Paul acquisition meant, and I think that move alone catapults him into the number one spot. Schlenk, I think you just have to give credit to how many moves were made to make the Atlanta Hawks such an improved unit. The big one is either Bogdan Bogdanovic or Danilo Gallinari, but then you also added Rajon Rondo and Chris Dunn, kept so many pieces in place, made smaller pickups for a guy like Tony Snell. And then I think he'll also receive some credit for the Clint Capella acquisition from last offseason, which should have a significant impact, or from last season, which should have a significant impact on the Hawks' efficacy on defense. And he didn't play last season, so it's going to feel like that new acquisition. So that's why I had him up at number 2, but it was difficult to leave Olshey off my ballot. I will say that much.
Yeah, Schlenk was tough to leave off too, just because I don't know how I feel. We both picked the over for the Hawks win totals, which was around 42 and an 82 game equivalent. I just don't know. There's like some combustibility with that roster, and I think signing Rondo was like not the best move after you already had Chris Dunn, so that could create some issues. But he has a strong case because they poached, I would say, 2 of the top 5 free agents that were like gettable, that we expected or thought maybe could actually change teams. We knew Anthony Davis and Brandon Ingram weren't going anywhere, so penciling out those guys. He was tough to leave off though for me too.
I wonder if we're going to see John Horst get any love in this just because of the Giannis Supermax, as well as the Drew Holiday trade. Like if Milwaukee does secure another number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference with Giannis locked up for the foreseeable future, I could see him getting some love as well.
That's fair. I don't know that you should be able to get that award after what happened with Bogdanovic. Someone, whether it could have been from the King side too, but like someone messed that entire process up by letting the information get out that early.
Yeah, agreed. Anyway, next up is the Coach of the Year. Dan, you want to take this one away too, or do you want me to go first on it?
Let's rotate. How about you go first this time?
I would love to go first. In third place, I have Monty Williams of the Phoenix Suns. I think that is, going to be for obvious reasons. Just with, as I said, while justifying the Executive of the Year case, like he's the one who's going to be responsible for that on-court product. As we're going to see the Suns, a franchise that hasn't been to the playoffs in roughly forever, cement itself as a Western Conference playoff team behind Chris Paul, behind Devin Booker, behind DeAndre Ayton, who I'm going to talk about later. So I feel like he is a very obvious choice to at least appear on one of those 3 spots. I've got Terry Stotts of the Portland Trailblazers at number 2. Again, as Dan mentioned, in the Executive of the Year category, this roster is just so much deeper, so much more talented, and it is going to require a lot of good coaching acumen to make all the pieces work, because there are still question marks with so many of the different main contributors, and how are they going to balance creating a good defense around Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum, which is something they've struggled to do at an elite level in the past, but now have that wing defensive juice to actually make it happen this season. But at number 1, I have Rick Carlisle, who is just perennially underrated. And I feel like this is the season where it almost becomes like a pseudo legacy pick that's also deserved just for the work in 2020-21, because I think that the Mavericks are just going to exceed even the highest expectations and push at least somewhat close to the number 1 seed in the Western Conference behind Luka Doncic. And doing that without Kristaps Porzingis available for the whole season for part of the season, is going to really earn him some kudos that he should have received so many times in the past, because Carlisle is the master at elevating the floor of the roster. No matter who the contributor is, like, that he's going to be productive if he's in the Mavericks rotation, because Carlisle is so good at getting something from everyone in the right way. So with a more talented roster that should compete for one of the top seeds in the West, I think this is finally the year that he gets that credit.
Yeah, what's interesting about Coach of the Year is I know it's always wide open, but I think you could probably throw a coach at random to me, any of the 30, and I could make a fairly strong case for them to win this award this season. Obviously, some stronger than others. My ballot, and you made fun of me for having ties in third place, but I told you I was going to break them in real time. Eric Spoelstra in third, just the type of coach I feel like could probably win it in any given year. I don't think the Heat were a flash in the pan last year, but I also think they're worse, noticeably worse, without Jay Crowder, and I don't know how their front court rotation remains as dynamic. That being said, that only sets the stage to me for him to exceed expectations with the team. Like maybe we're just going to all of a sudden see Duncan Robinson play a bunch of 4 or small ball with Duncan Robinson at the 5. Like he'll do something weird to make up for it. I had Terry Stotts in second place as well. I actually put him first when we made these picks for Bleacher Report, our full-time employer. It was just agony choosing between him and what's actually going to be my first place one. I don't have much to add to what you said, except for the fact that what the Blazers have done on defense, and while it hasn't always worked when you look at their standings, like they try and limit like the damage is done by playing this. It's like a team-friendly defense where it's like kind of tries to de-emphasize the weaknesses of everybody. And now they've added one of the best team defenders in the league in Robert Covington, and it just makes so much sense. And then even with Derrick Jones Jr. being able to fly around there, I don't know that the players are going to deserve a bulk of the credit for it, but the way that they've played, I think is going to end up suiting this roster really well, which ends up boding well for Stotts. And the other thing would be for me with him is how he juggles the wing rotation because there's so many of them. And then what happens with Melo, because he has to be part of like being upfront and transparent, like Damian Lillard was, like CJ McCollum was, like Neil O'Shea was, in kind of handling that situation. And so if he's able to navigate that, I'm betting that he can in good fashion. That's really going to put his name in there. My actual pick was Monty Williams, who was your third place pick. The Suns are going to be really good, and I'm convinced, I don't know if this take is spicy, but I'm convinced that one of them or the Blazers are going to finish top 3 in the West this season. And maybe I'm overselling the number of games that Chris Paul is going to play in for Phoenix, and that certainly changes the calculus, but even if Chris Paul misses like 15 games or something, I feel like the Suns are built to be good like without him. I wouldn't be nearly as high on them or necessarily pick them to finish above 500 if you take Chris Paul out of this equation. But Devin Booker is so good, and you've merely sort of improved the talent around. Like having Jay Crowder there is just like a really big upgrade for them when you're looking at the wing rotation. I also expect big things from Mikal Bridges. So I think the Suns are going to be good enough to put him in that conversation, which is saying a whole lot. Maybe he kind of carries over some goodwill from the bubble because of just how much acclaim the Suns were generating in there. And we saw some of the videos of the behind the scenes. We're not there on a day-to-day basis. And even the beat reporters, like they don't know what's happening every moment, but it seems like he really resonates with those players. And that's not something small because that's still a young team when you're looking at many of their most important players, namely Devin Booker, Mikal Bridges, and DeAndre Ayton. I think Cam Johnson is 34, so he doesn't count. But yeah, that's one or two could go either way here for me.
I do always I feel a little wrong picking Coach of the Year each time we do this, just because, as you mentioned, we aren't there to see what's happening behind the scenes on a day-to-day basis. We're not, totally attuned to the strategic shifts and the X's and O's that are being implemented day in and day out. So it always kind of it feels a little iffy to me to even pick this one, just since it's almost like rewarding the coach whose team exceeded expectations the most, which it's hard to decide who should get credit for that.
Yeah, and it's also just maddening to have to pick from a field that includes so many legitimate possibilities.
Yeah. But now we can move to the players with Sixth Man of the Year. And it's your turn to go first.
So I went with Melo in third because look, he averaged over 15 points and shot better than 38% from 3 last year, and sort of had the perfect sixth man impact without being the sixth man for them. There's something to the effect of can Melo stay in rhythm if he's playing fewer minutes off the bench, and I think that's fair. But the Blazers do a better job of, it's certainly better than the Rockets did, of letting him indulge being Melo, where letting him set up on the block, work from ISO, but then he's also willing to, shoot a bunch of catch and shoot threes. And if he's playing in the second unit, he's going to be able to be probably even more so his normal self, because you're not going to have Damian Lillard on the court. You might not have both he and CJ McCollum on the court in those minutes. You're either playing with one or none of them for a lot of your time. If he ends up closing games, that probably bolsters his case. I don't know what that actually does for the Blazers' case of winning those games, just depending on how the lineup is fleshed out around him. But I think that this is the year. I'm not going to predict Olympics medal, but I think this is the year where bringing him off the bench works. Danilo Gallinari's runner-up for me. When we did, when I did the Hawks Outlook pod, it's tough to say whether he'll stay on the bench for the entire season. There's one, injuries could factor into that. What if they trade John Collins? Should they be unable to hash out an extension? So there's a little bit of risk there. But Danilo Gallinari is just one of the best offensive players in the league. And it doesn't really get talked about enough, how malleable his scoring is at every level. And he's someone who's going to generate his own shot. He can hit a bunch of catch and shoots. Defenses are going to overreact to his pump fakes because they're convinced that he could score from anywhere. And his availability can be an issue, but that's not really like too big of a deal in Sixth Man of the Year discussions. And this is a stat while I was writing about him that I just found so fascinating. Since 2015, 2016, he's averaging 18.8 points on a 47.3 free throw attempt rate and a 60.8 true shooting percentage. There's only one player who is hitting those benchmarks across the same time span. Would you even care to guess who that one player is?
James Harden?
I hate you. It's James Harden. But like that's wild to me. And he just seems like he's perfectly built to play the bench role. And I feel like by coming off the bench, they might be able to move him around in a bunch of different positions. Maybe we see him play more backup five than we really expected because Onyeka Okongwu either he's not going to be ready right away, and who knows how long it takes for him to come around, and perhaps they don't want to log John Collins as a backup five in too many minutes. So he's two, and first place for me is probably a risk too. Karis LeVert, I think that's going to end up being his best role in Brooklyn. It puts the ball in his hands more, and he was one of the best off the dribble 3-point shooters last year. And I know people kind of harp on his efficiency off the catch. It's not good. That's fair. It doesn't matter as much though if he's the sixth man. He'll only, most of his minutes when he's coming alongside Kyrie and KD will be in closing games, so he does have to figure it out. But to put the ball in his hands more makes sense, and part of that is he's a really good passer. Like, there are shots that aren't going to be there if he's not in the game. Compared to Kyrie Irving, like, is he a better playmaker than Kyrie Irving? I don't know. I call him comparable just because table setting isn't necessarily the crux of Kyrie's game. So when Karis LeVert gets moving, he makes some really nice finds. And if he's going to be the first guy off the bench for Brooklyn and he stays healthy, and if you could guarantee me that he stays in that role, he would be my overwhelming favorite to win this award.
So I have Karis LeVert in third place for my ballot, and largely for the same reasons that you have. I don't know if he's going to stay in that role. I don't know if he's going to be traded midway through the season, but I was just so blown away by the facilitating improvements that he made throughout this past offseason that even though this is largely a scoring-centric award, I would say, just based on the history of who's been selected to win Sixth Man of the Year, that those passing chops are just going to earn him a lot of love and elevate him up player rankings in general. I'm going to skip to number one because I had Danilo Gallinari there. It is a risk, as you said, because he could move into the starting lineup, but he's just such a talented scorer, and the Hawks need guys who can create their own shots and who can generate free throw attempts. And he's going to live at the line just like he always does. He's dangerous from all three levels. He has, throughout his career, he's come off the bench in 60 career games, and his shooting numbers have been worse in that role. But I think it's telling that he accepted that role as a condition upon coming to Atlanta. They made no secrets that they intended to bring him off the bench, at least to start this season. So the fact that he's buying into that role gives me a little bit more confidence. The only discrepancy that I had on my ballot was I had Will Barton as my primary runner-up. Again, it's a little bit of a risk because he could supplant Gary Harris in the starting lineup. The Nuggets could also eventually opt to bring Michael Porter Jr. off the bench and start Barton at the 3. But it's hard to believe how important he is to this team and this organization, given the fact that it went on a Western Conference Finals run in the bubble without him. But he keys so much of what they do on the offensive end with his transition ability, with his ability to create his own shots and just kind of wreak havoc in that half-court setting. With his physicality, his aggressiveness, he gives them another outlet with which they can create on the offensive end, and is also a little bit underrated these days on defense. So, as I said, it tends to be a scoring-based award, and he's going to put up a lot of points regardless of his role.
Yeah, and look, I guess the other part for him would be, can he stay healthy, just because he's had some health issues the past couple of years. But that's an awesome pick.
That's a Gallo question too, yeah.
And so I guess we're assuming that it's Harris and Michael Porter Jr. starting in Denver then, if that's going to make Will Barton sixth year.
Yeah, it seems to be a safe bet based on what we're seeing so far and just the overall roster construction.
Hey, let's start rotating who's going to name the award, since you're going to go first on this award. This is your baby, or the one that at least is more of your baby than mine. Defensive Player of the Year. Take us through your ballot, please.
I ultimately agree with you, where I don't think this one is that interesting to talk about because it's the same players every year. So it's a big award. Like I still think it's the second biggest award that the NBA hands out, but it's inherently disinteresting because it's rehashed every year. So I'll go fairly quickly here. And in third, I have Anthony Davis, who is the fulcrum behind everything the Los Angeles Lakers do on the defensive end. They have one of the top defenses in the NBA. He is obviously impactful through his sheer block and shot alteration numbers and is versatile enough to basically guard anyone for a possession at a time. He's a virtual lock to appear near the top of the ballot any given year while he's in his prime, and this should be no different. Second place, I have Ben Simmons, who is probably the most versatile defender in the NBA. Like, you talk about guys who can guard positions 1 through 5, and he should be at the top of the list. I believe that B-Ball Index is Krishna Narsu, his versatility index. Simmons is always near the top in terms of just the variety of players that he guards, and he doesn't just guard them, he guards them well. There's some risk here if he gets moved. He's currently in the middle, and I guess this could age poorly if the trade takes place between recording and release. But he's in the middle of trade talks to potentially be moved in a James Harden trade to the Houston Rockets. I don't think that would tank his Defensive Player of the Year stock, just because he is going to be such a game-changing defender regardless of where he is. But my number one pick is a repeat winner here with Giannis Antetokounmpo. Similar reasons as both of the other guys, where he can just do absolutely everything on the defensive end. And it feels like the Bucks are taking away a little bit of his offensive responsibilities with the acquisition of Drew Holiday, who can create more offense. Between him and Chris Middleton, Giannis might not have to expend as much energy on the offensive end, which means it's absolutely terrifying to think about what he could do on defense if he's able to channel that energy into that end of the court. He was already just such a wrecking ball who could guard anyone, and just much like the other guys, and was just so remarkably impactful night in and night out. And I feel like there's yet another level to his defensive game that he is in a position to reach this year. You're muted.
I'm going to start with Giannis, who is number 2 on my list. And I agree with everything you said. I'm just curious as if we could see regression from the Bucks on defense overall. Just looking at what if Brook Lopez doesn't have the same year? You don't have Wesley Matthews, and Drew Holiday is like, yeah, he has more positional range than Eric Bledsoe did. But you're sort of in this situation now where unless you're going to use Middleton against these number 1 wing types, there are going to be matchups where I don't think that you can necessarily use Drew Holiday as that guy. And so Giannis has been at his best when he's just allowed to float and
free safety,
and gamble and all that. I don't know if he has that same freedom this year. Maybe that doesn't matter. I considered putting him 1 even more so when you'll hear my pick, just because of how much of a risk it is. For 3, it was a toss-up between Rudy Gobert and Anthony Davis for me. I went with Anthony Davis. It's not a question of voter fatigue for me. I don't think that Rudy Gobert is actually going to regress. That he was the only reason that the Jazz didn't fall further outside the top 10 of defensive efficiency. It's just that he does do a little bit less when you're looking at moving around the court, and I think the level of responsibility matters. And the other thing for me is, I do wonder if the Jazz are good enough defensively to make it work. Having Derek Favors in the backup 5 minutes should help, but as you raise your hand, but I don't. Just looking at this, the wing rotation, there's not a lot of athleticism there. That was a problem last year, and then even the backup wing rotation could get a little bit weird. Maybe I end up being way off on this. He's always in contention for the award, but that was my reasoning behind not putting him on this ballot.
I just wanted to say that I really struggled not to put Gobert because on a per possession basis, he absolutely deserves to be up there. But it's the added depth that the Jazz have for me. Bringing Derek Favors back and the drafting of Udoka Azubuike, who is he's able to fill.
So you're saying they're going to trade him?
I'm not saying they're going to trade him. I'm saying they're not going to need to rely on him quite as much this year and get to preserve him for that inevitable playoff run. So I just don't think that he's going to play enough minutes this year.
The other player I thought about is Joel Embiid. I just don't know if he's going to play in enough games to make this work. And then if he ends up playing with James Harden, I do think that makes his job a lot harder. I'm not even trying to make a joke there, but it just does. Going from Ben Simmons to James Harden would be a huge difference. So I have Anthony Davis at number 3, and if I could describe his defense in one word, it would just be ubiquitous. He is everywhere at the same time without ever diverging too far from his actual assignment. Just his length, his disruption. He is so good, and a lot of people cited the on-off splits for him last year with the Lakers, where they were actually more efficient defensively with him off the court. When you look at the lineups that he was saddled with propping up outside of the starters, that explains a lot of the murky data. And it's, he's not going to be have those raw rim protection numbers, but only because he spends so much time away from it and is just everywhere. So it wouldn't surprise me if he actually won it. My question would be, does he play in enough games? Do the Lakers care enough about the regular season to be elite defensively? Those are, baseline, low-hanging fruit questions, but they're fair. And then Simmons is number one for me. If he gets traded, I don't know how I feel about that if you put him in Houston. I don't actually want him in Houston, by the way. If they do move him, I hope there's like a third team. Is it, Portland or Phoenix that can like kind of get in there and just put him in a better situation? Digressing though, he's the most versatile defender in the NBA right now. And you already talked about like the versatility rating, but he is like really, some people don't think he could defend the 5. I would still use him at the 5 just to test it out, but he can go 1 through 4 without missing a beat. And it's not even that. It's if you pick a guard, a wing, and just say, go delete him from the planet, he basically can just do it. It's like, yeah, he could do a lot of stuff away from the ball, but if you want him to zero in on someone and just take him out of the game plan, Ben Simmons is the defender that can do that. Yes,
it's a great way to put it.
I'm like being hyperbolic a little bit, but I'm also not. Like, he's just so good at doing that. So if he stays in Philly, is how I would feel really good about this award. And look, it lends itself, if he actually doesn't end up on the Rockets, it's probably because Philly's playing pretty damn well, in which case he's probably having an exceptional defensive season just like he normally does.
A lot of good candidates, but yeah, I mean, it feels like we're mentioning the same names. So let's move on to Rookie of the Year, which inherently has to have new names. And it almost feels like we should just skip this award this year because it kind of feels like a Michael Carter-Williams year where like there might not be any true game-changing rookies unless you feel differently about one of your top 3 picks.
Look, first of all, I'm just happy that you've been converted to my Rookie of the Year pick. So, one.
However, converted. I said this from the beginning.
Oh, well, I didn't know you said it because we were doing NBA 100 rankings on the side, and you said, are you putting so-and-so as Rookie of the Year because he's the only rookie you gave an X score to? So I'm counting it as I got there first.
Fair enough.
Well, here's a question, and you're going to hear it on the next segment of this pod because I talk with Spins about it. But if you had to pick one rookie to be a top 100 player this year, who would it be?
I don't think I would.
Yeah, we couldn't do it. That's what happened. Anyway.
Yeah, so I have no idea.
Third for me was Patrick Williams in Chicago. It'll be interesting to see what type of volume he shoulders. It does look like they're going to throw him on wings, which could get really ugly defensively. But I think he's going to end up being better on offense than people believe. And if, you can get him ample minutes in the front court at the 4, that probably means a knifing into what Thaddeus Young is doing, maybe even Otto Porter, more so than Larry Markkinen. Maybe even look at moving Markkinen at some point in the season, should you not agree to an extension. But I think they really want to see he and Wendell Carter Jr. play together. I just love the idea of Patrick Williams, and I would throw him at small ball 5. I think I'm a sucker for small ball lineups.
No, I agree.
But I would try that too. So I think he's going to be better defensively than the average rookie, and I think his offense is going to surprise some people. It might be slow motion, but he can do more stuff off the dribble than he was credited with coming into the league. He is one of the rookies that I actually heavily scouted. I'm going with LaMelo Ball for number 2. And it was hard not to put him number 1 by virtue of the volume he's going to enjoy, especially if Gordon Hayward's going to be dealing with injuries yet again. Here's hoping he recovers from his fracture soon. But my whole thing here is like, from the highlights I've seen in preseason, because I've been on a preseason blackout while wrapping NBA 100, his passing is divine. And so he's just assist numbers alone might throw him up there. My pick was, though, Tyrese Halliburton. I think there's going to be a real role for him in Sacramento, even if they don't trade Buddy Hield. I don't know that he'll work his way into the starting lineup over him, but I think he'll play a bunch of minutes. I even see scenarios where they play Buddy Hield, and De'Aaron Fox together, and he's like a borderline perfect fit to play beside Fox. He can shoot off the catch. He can also be sort of that secondary creator in minutes without Fox. And I think he's probably going to be close to, like, he's going to be one of the best defensive rookies, I think. And he just has like real wing defensive range. He was the player, as you know, that I wanted the Knicks to take, and they did not. And I think that stance is going to age extremely well for me, but that also means the pain is going to age extremely potently for me. And he's my Rookie of the Year pick. I understand. I think LaMelo Ball is the smart, safe choice, but there's something about Halliburton that I just can't quit.
I am right there with you on Halliburton, who was also my number 1 pick for this award. I was similarly disappointed when the Atlanta Hawks did not take him because he would have been such an ideal fit next to Trae Young. And then I was disappointed when the Phoenix Suns didn't take him because he would have gotten a chance to learn from and play next to both Chris Paul and Devin Booker. But Sacramento is a really good landing spot for him. The two-way ability is key for any rookie, just for carving out minutes, not necessarily in the rookie of the year conversation, because it does tend to be who put up the most glamorous numbers, but it guarantees him playing time, which is really important in this class, just because that's relatively uncertain for just about every incoming first-year player.
Right.
I had LaMelo Ball down at number 3. I do think that that the Hornets are going to feature him heavily, but the learning curve is going to be steep for him. He's not going to be an efficient shooter. He's going to struggle with turnovers a lot. He's going to lead the rookie class in highlight plays, and I don't know if that's going to be enough to move him up the ballot to that number 1 spot, because it's going to be a struggle, and that's by design in a lot of ways, just because they're committing to him as the future face of the franchise, and they're going to feature him right out of the gate. I do have Obi Toppin at number 2, though. He might come off the bench for the Knicks. He probably will come off the bench for the Knicks, but he's just such a special offensive talent that I think he is the safe bet to lead this class in scoring as a first-year player, which tends to matter a lot. But yeah, I mean, if you go back and watch him at Dayton, led the NCAA in dunks, was an efficient three-point shooter. He's a guy who can create for himself, can play in the pick and roll, can play off the ball, can't play with Julius Randle because everyone struggles to do that. But aside from that, like he's in good position to put up some big numbers.
I guess the Knicks have put enough non-impact veteran talent around him to ensure Tibbs will actually play him. But Julius Randle might be like a huge roadblock to his winning Rookie of the Year because Tibbs will play him so much. That's an interesting pick.
That's why I had to throw in a shot, though.
Most improved player. I believe it's your turn to go first. Why don't you take us through your picks?
I can't believe I'm about to talk about back-to-back Knicks. That seems like it has to be the first time in decades on an awards podcast.
I'm very interested to hear your justification for this because I think it's an awful pick. I just want to preface before you even get into it. I'm going to taint the listeners by saying that I think you're full of shit.
I appreciate that. Like, the honesty is always welcome. But yeah, my number 3 pick, and I guess I'll let you respond to it right after I attempt to justify it, I suppose. But yeah, I've got RJ Barrett here. I'm usually very hesitant to pick second-year players, but I think that he learned so much from the first season. As much as he struggled to shoot the ball efficiently, to look like he was comfortable operating within the confines of the Knicks' broken offense. But I don't know. Maybe it's just a gut feeling here, but I see a special offensive talent, and watching him in this brief 3-game preseason sample with which we're working before making those picks, like, he's averaging 18.7 points, and more importantly, he's finding the right shots. That's without his three-pointer falling, which we know can, but he's still shooting 51.1% from the field. He's limiting his turnovers despite filling a bigger role. And I see him using what he messed up on during his rookie season, as disastrous as it was for a lofty pick, and really learning from that and becoming a much more competent player who is going to be the centerpiece of the Knicks.
Now, I want to make it clear that I think there's a pathway to RJ Barrett becoming a really good player. I think this pick looks terrible until or unless the Knicks move or stop playing Julius Randle next to RJ Barrett. It just neuters their spacing because Randle can't be the center in those situations, and they don't have these. If you want to play him next to Toppin, fine, but that's going to just be
I don't think Randle will finish the season in New York.
Good, but
that's
I think
part and parcel here.
But I think it's really important that he doesn't even begin the season playing a lot of time next to RJ Barrett. Look, he takes the ball out of his hands at points, and then the way that the floor shrinks. So I do think RJ Barrett has the talent to do it. However, I would argue, even if you get rid of the Julius Randle factor, the high bar that we hold most improved player for when you're going from rookie to sophomore, it doesn't normally feel like a situation where it was, oh, you were kind of whatever during your rookie season, and now you're replacement level or above as an NBA player. It's, oh, you were Luka Doncic, and then you were year 2 Luka Doncic type situation. So that would be my argument against it. I think I hope you're right. I think it's a terrible pick.
We'll see. That's all I have to respond there.
But it's third on your ballot, so let's go up it. They get better, I think.
Right. It can only get better, right? At number 2, and I strongly considered having him at number 1, is OG Anunoby for the Toronto Raptors. His role is just going to explode this season. He's bringing the ball up the court in preseason and initiating offense. He's being tasked with shooting the ball more, both on drives to the rim and cuts off the ball and spot up shots, just things that he wasn't asked to do with frequency while the Raptors still had Serge Ibaka and Marc Gasol there. He's just, I am foreseeing an absolute explosion here in all facets of the game, and he's already one of the more versatile and potent defensive players. So I would be shocked if he doesn't finish within the top 5 of most improved player voting. But at number 1, I had a guy who I almost considered, like, and I didn't, and I wasn't really that close to. I almost considered having him on my MVP ballot, and that's DeAndre Ayton. And I think we are about to see a massive jump from him. We saw throughout last year where he started to look far more engaged and competent on the defensive end. That's only going to continue to look better with more competent pieces around him in Phoenix. He now gets to feast on pick and roll passes from Chris Paul. And even beyond that, during the preseason, we're seeing him show off new elements of his game, whether it's these floater hook, these hook shots around the paint, or even working as a passer more often. That was one of the things he tended to struggle with most last year. Was he wasn't able to see the court in a way that he could pass teammates open, or if he got doubled down, he couldn't hit that kick out pass. And we're seeing him start to do that already. And I see him becoming a complete player who is a no doubt like fringe superstar by the end of this year.
I like that pick. I just question whether a lot of his improvement could be chalked up to playing beside Chris Paul and Devin Booker. The thing that I think his pathway to doing that would be if they play him in units where neither Paul or Booker are there. I know they're going to stagger them a bunch as they should, but let's say those like 5 to 7 minutes a game, they don't play with each other. Ayton's just on there. The other thing is just if his defensive improvement really continues. I know a lot of people talked about how much he improved in space last year. He also at times looked like a legitimate defensive quarterback where he was just making the smart rotations around the rims, providing help at the right time. And so if he continues to do that and like he's an anchor for a Suns being like 12th, 13th, like that type of range in defensive efficiency, I think he has a real case. He, however, did not make my top 3. And my third is Jaylen Brown, which I think is going to catch some people off guard because
it's almost as bad a pick as Barrett.
Why is it bad? Look, he had a case last year, averaged 20 points up from 13, career high 2.1 assists, shot 38.2% from 3, 54.3% on 2s. His game is extremely plug and play. He also improved his free throw percentage last year. When you're looking at sort of what he does on offense, like the vast majority of his damage is going to come, in transition and on spot ups. Almost 90% of his made threes last year came off assists. However, they doubled his pick and roll frequency very quietly last year. And I think they're going to up it even more this year because of the Kemba Walker injury, because they decided to sign Jeff Teague instead of Shabazz Napier or bringing back Brad Wanamaker for some reason. I don't know if he gets that playmaking jump, but I think there's going to be a little bit of it by necessity. And then I could even see his scoring is going to go up because you lost Gordon Hayward. And then who knows how long it's going to be until you get Kemba Walker back. Like those points have to come from somewhere. I could see Jaylen Brown being in a situation where he's averaging like 25, like close to it. Jayson Tatum's certainly going to be in that discussion as well. And so if he scores a little bit more, continues playing, he's probably their second most valuable defender behind Smart. It depends on how much you value what Tatum really does off the ball. But I think a lot of Boston's lineups work because of the bigger wings that Jaylen Brown can just tackle one-on-one. So if he's still defending like that, and again his creation ups a little bit, and he's scoring at the same clip or a little bit higher, if it's a little bit higher, I could see it kind of being like a Paul George type situation when he won it. So that would be wouldn't compare him to Paul George, who's always been better operating off the dribble, but I think he's going to have the license to do more on offense this year, which buoys his case for me. You thought that was a bad pick. Would you like to take the talking stick for a minute?
I was just going to say, just to be clear, I don't actually think it's a bad pick. I wanted to see what it was like to insult my co-host here, since you rarely give me those opportunities.
Was it fun? Did you enjoy it? It's probably a lot better if you have.
I would enjoy it more if it was like a legitimate criticism. Right. It would have been more fun. I guess I'm shocked that you didn't have Chris Boucher in this spot. So I guess I can criticize you for that.
People are not on the Chris Boucher train. That dude blocks jumpers like
You're
they're
the
layups.
But I'm in the second car.
That's fair. I accept that. Everyone will be at my level by the end of the season, rest assured. My second pick was Mikal Bridges, and it's funny that we both had members of the Suns on here. I have him, if we we don't do on this podcast all NBA, all defense predictions preseason. We do them like midseason. It just feels like too much of a crapshoot to do them before the season. Mikal Bridges would be my pick right now to make all defense, and I see a path to him being more consistent on offense based how last year finished. He's always been a good cutter, but he showed a little bit more consistency hitting his threes and actually taking them as opposed to passing them up. He even busted out like a couple step backs and pull up threes. And then his playmaking on drives is really understated. Those lanes are going to be even more available to him when you go from Ricky Rubio to Chris Paul, who's just a much better shooter. So he's kind of a gamble, and I considered putting Brown ahead of him because I'm not sure he'll have the offensive volume looking at Phoenix's pecking order, but he might just be so good on defense where people just realize, like, oh, Mikal Bridges exists and is really good. I think he works his way into it. And then I had OG Anunoby here, basically for all the reasons you said. He might already be the best non-Kawhi, locked-in Kawhi on-ball defender in the NBA, and his three-point shooting was up. He shot a good clip from three-point range last year, and then he put the ball on the floor more than ever. I don't know that he's ever going to run half-court pick and rolls. Like, I don't know they're going to take him the route.
I think he's going to.
They might take him the route of Siakam. Like, they've done it with Siakam. Why won't they do it with Anunoby, whose handle can be, like, kind of loosey-goosey at times, but the Raptors, they try shit. Like, I don't know what, like, the Raptors try stuff. So I think he's just going to have higher volume on offense coupled with his defense, and what will also help elevate his profile is I do expect the Raptors to be better than anticipated again, where most people have them in like 5, 6, 7 range. I don't know that they're going to be number 2 again. I think they're going to be in the top 4. So that's all going to help elevate his profile. So there's just not much to add to what you said. The major boon for him is going to be that offensive volume, though.
I really wanted to have OG in my number 1 spot, but I'm just so high on DeAndre Ayton and like potentially becoming like a top 15, top 20 player this season.
We're also contractually obligated to fit as many Suns candidates into this exercise as possible.
Apparently so. But yeah, let's move on to MVP and let's switch our structure up a little bit here since this is a top 5 ballot. Let's have you do number 5, then I'll do my number 5, and then you can do your number 4, so on and so forth.
Can I shame you for having 2 number 5s at the moment? Like, what's going to happen here?
You'll have to wait and see what happens.
Do we need to go 10 deep on this award? Do I go off the cuff and name 5 more?
We should. The MVP ballot should be 10 deep, much like All-Star roster should expand.
Yeah, because my take would be, I won't spoil it. I'll wait until you say it, since you did pencil it and I didn't. Giannis is 5 for me. Voter fatigue is just... I think it wouldn't surprise me if he won 3 in a row, but I think LeBron would maybe retire if Giannis wins 3 in a row when he never did. So I voter fatigue is going to get to him. I don't know. I don't expect him to be any worse, but people are also, unless he, people are going to be, I don't want to say against him, but based off what's happened in the playoffs now, where even now it looked like he had counters because he was comfortable pulling up into wide open threes, even if he wasn't hitting them at an efficient clip. And then
turnaround jumpers.
Yes, turnaround jumpers. They didn't work in the playoffs. And so I think that's going to stick with people, even if they work in the regular season. I don't expect Giannis to be worse. And again, I think you could probably, everyone here is interchangeable. Like if we went 10 deep, I think I could come up with legitimately 10 players who might finish first. I think just after winning it twice, the voter fatigue will be there, and maybe he'll dominate more of the defensive player of the year discussion.
Yeah, I do have Giannis on my ballot, just not in the number 5 spot. I was so close to putting Devin Booker in my number 5 spot. I have him listed with a question mark in addition to my actual number 5 choice. I think the Suns are going to elevate so high up the Western Conference standings, and he's as high as I am on Ayton. I still think Booker is going to be the player who's perceived as the best. And if I didn't think Ayton was going to improve that much, I would have actually put him here. I would have actually put Booker here, But I do have Jayson Tatum in my number 5 spot, and I'm expecting him to get off to an absolutely scorching start. As I've said on previous episodes, with Kemba Walker out, I think this is a chance for Tatum to continue to show off those facilitating improvements that he's made throughout the last season and especially in the playoffs. He's going to have a few triple doubles during the first month of the season, and he will be working with an advantage throughout the year. But I can't elevate him over the 4 established stars that I have above him.
Yeah, the thing with me is I wanted to put him there too. I think if the Suns are good enough for him to be in the discussion, that Chris Paul is going to cannibalize a lot of those votes.
Yeah, and Ayton too.
No, but carry on.
No, I don't mean Ayton's going to get MVP votes. I mean that he's going to take credit away from Booker.
Oh yeah, fair enough. That's They'll be like, oh well, look, he has a good team around him, and it's like, well, that's kind of sort of the point there, Chiefs.
Right.
But number four. I like the thought though. I have Tatum on my ballot too, just a teensy bit higher than you do. Number 4 for me is Nikola Jokic. Again, I could talk myself into putting him higher. I just don't know if the Nuggets are going to be better in the regular season. I see a pathway to it, but I think the storyline might be, oh, look at Michael, and I'm not trying to say this is all narrative, but it's part of it. But look at Michael Porter Jr.'s growth. Look at Jamal Murray. This is the year that he really puts it together as an offensive star and is more consistent. Maybe they are just as good at finishing second, but it's a situation where you could be numb to it. Or again, after losing Grant and Craig, unless you trade for another wing, unless Will Barton stays healthy or Michael Porter Jr. really makes a leap, you could be substantially worse defensively, just also looking at how old Paul Millsap has gotten in a very short amount of time, it seems. And it's funny that I feel like
2020 has done that to so many of us, though.
Right. And it's funny that I actively have to criticize him to justify why he's only 4th on the MVP ballot. So the better way to look at that is I wouldn't pick Jokic to win it this year, though it wouldn't surprise me if he did, but I do think he's kind of certified top 5.
It feels like there are 8 or 9 players who you could very feasibly pick to win it, and Jokic is unquestionably on that list. I actually don't have him in my top 5. I feel terrible about that because he deserves to be. But yeah, I mean, I'm not certain that the Nuggets are going to improve during the regular season upon last year's efforts, and that tends to matter. I do have Steph Curry as my number 4, and the justification, as tautological as it seems, is just that he's Steph Curry. And I think it's important to note that means that he's coming off a year where he only played in 5 games due to injury. But that's not a recurring injury concern. This isn't like him having ankle flare-ups or rupturing an Achilles or anything like that. He had a hand injury. He's back. He's going to be fine. We're already seeing the shooting range in preseason games. And the most important thing about Steph is that he elevates everyone around him. So if he makes Andrew Wiggins better, if he allows Kelly Oubre Jr. to continue to make further leaps, if Draymond Green looks younger and more engaged, this Warriors team is going to rise significantly up the standings into the playoff picture, and it's going to be because of Steph.
Yeah, look, I think it's important. Let me just go right into my next spot because it's Stephen Curry, number 3 for me. And I don't really have much to add to anything you said. If he stays healthy, there's no reason that the Warriors aren't going to be a playoff team. I guess the question would be, are they going to finish high enough in the standings for him to get that love? I think he would have to be at least 5th. And that would be an outlier season. Not he, but the Warriors. They could definitely get there. It seems from the very little preseason basketball I've watched, again, this team is really going to hustle, and they might be better defensively than I thought that they were going to be. And just surround Steph with a healthy Draymond eventually. And I don't think Draymond's drop off from last year is going to be for real. He's 30. He's not 100. And he played in 41 games, 43 games, whatever it was. He was banged up. He was 5 straight finals runs. He had a bunch of different things going on. There were no stakes. I think he'll be better. So I do think the team will be good enough. But this is the year that hopefully we do reappreciate how valuable Stephen Curry is, because the Warriors have kind of always been his to carry. It's just been easily eclipsed because they had Kevin Durant. They had peak Draymond Green. They had Klay Thompson as well. Now they don't have Klay. They don't have Durant. They probably don't have peak Draymond. If he's healthy, again, I expect the Warriors to be good quality, and that's going to do wonders for his MVP case. I just can't emphasize enough how much he just changes the geometry and scope of the court by not even having the ball, but by just being on it.
Right. I don't feel like it's that unrealistic to think that if everything goes right for Golden State, that it could be a top 4 team in the West because of Steph. If he is back to that peak MVP level, if Draymond Green is fully motivated, if James Wiseman is able to contribute heavily as a rookie, if Eric Pascal and Jordan Poole and Kent Bazemore and Brad Wanamaker all provide quality depth with Steph buoying this team, it could very realistically rise that high up.
Yeah, again, this is so tough. I feel like there could be. I can't spoil it because we have 2 picks to go, but there's so many players that I could just talk myself into in this spot more than usual, right?
Agreed.
Yeah,
absolutely agreed. Number 3, I have Damian Lillard, and I think that he has so much goodwill carrying over from his bubble MVP and just the scorching heights that he hit for the Portland Trailblazers during that run to the play-in game. And the first round loss to the Lakers, that it's going to carry over into this season with a much improved roster around him. Because as good as this Blazers team could be with a healthy use of Nurkic, with Carmelo Anthony motivated, with Robert Covington and Derek Jones Jr. and Gary Trent Jr. and everyone else, there's still no question that Lillard is the fulcrum of everything that Portland does. And he is still just so ridiculously talented on the offensive end. And beyond that, even with this shortened offseason, he's also one of those guys who seems to bring something new every year, whether it's expanded shooting range or better pick and roll defense or just the ability to make those cross court passes, the skip passes. Like there's always something new that he brings. And I feel like he can keep reaching those heights that he hit, not just in the bubble, but also in February, right before everything shut down. If the regular season had continued uninterrupted by the coronavirus pandemic, I think that Lillard could have worked himself into a higher slot in the MVP balloting last season.
It arguably was his finest body of work, given the breadth of injuries that they had to navigate, and he was tough for me to leave off my top five. He's the one that I left off that I feel most confident could win the award, having left him off my top. And I reserve the right to change this top five MVP ballot by opening night. If I decide I want to pick Damian Lillard to win MVP, I reserve that right. Number two for me is the other thing that helps is the Blazers are going to be good this year, in my estimation, and so that's if he's in contention for a top 4 seed with the Blazers, that helps a bunch. Number two for me is Luka Doncic. I think that he has the narrative there because KP is going to miss some time, and I think even with KP, Dallas is a 1-star operation now, and that's situations that we might voters will gravitate towards. Excuse me, I can't speak apparently as per usual. The other thing is he's just really good, which I think helps as well. And so, like, what is the next?
Does that help?
A little bit.
I just want to be clear. Like, do you need to be good at basketball?
I went through this when, going from his rookie to sophomore season, he was so good as a rookie. I didn't know what an improved version of him looked like. And then he goes from 21 points per game to almost 29, 6 assists a game to almost 9 assists per game, ups his true shooting percentage by 4 points, starts finishing through contact better, shot 57.4% on twos, and we're not talking about him feasting on gimmies at the rim either. What does the next version of Luka Doncic look like? I'm not even going to begin to hazard that I can fathom it because it's going to be ridiculous. And the Mavericks are still set up to run everything through him. Maybe even more so than the Rockets are this year if James Harden sticks around. That's not even a knock against him because that play style can be fit to play with others, but he just makes the game so much easier for everyone else. The way he uplifted what was one of the most efficient offenses ever last season. The big thing for him that I think could turn this really in his favor is if he's competent in crunch time. A lot of it is he needs help, like better shot creation around him. But he needs to take better shots too. Like the step back can't become a crutch for him. And the other thing is like maybe he just hits his step backs / threes in general at a higher clip. He's at 32.1% for his career, slightly lower than that, I believe, on step backs. I forgot to double check. If he hits that at like 34, 35%, it's just over. I'm not picking Dallas to win the title, but like Luka Doncic is like fast track to probably best player in the league or most valuable offensive player in the league. He's close to that level already. I wouldn't say best player in the league, but there's a case to make that he's maybe better than James Harden right now. I don't know that I personally would make it, but it's there.
I have trouble disagreeing with anything that you said, and Luka Doncic is not at number 2 on my ballot. I'll let you draw your own conclusions until we reveal whether he's number 1 or not in my top 5. But my runner-up is Giannis. I don't think that he is going to win 3 in a row, largely for those voter fatigue reasons. But I do feel compelled to defend him here, just because the idea that he didn't validate how good he was during each of the last 2 regular seasons in the playoffs is a little bit faulty. During last year's 9-game postseason run, he averaged 26.7 points, 13.8 rebounds, 5.7 assists, 0.7 steals, and 0.9 blocks. He shot 55.9% from the field. He made 1.4 threes per game, albeit at a 32.5% clip. And he did struggle from the foul line. That's the biggest knock. But he did all that in 30.8 minutes per game. And I think that's the reason that this narrative that he wasn't able to validate the improvements exists. And it's because Mike Budenholzer held him back by not playing him more, by insisting on having the depth of the rotation and all that. So I think that as much as that's going to exist in people's minds, it will quickly be erased when he just dominates again during the regular season with an even better team around him.
Yeah, it's maybe I was overestimating what the voter fatigue will be with him, but I do feel like people look at players when they have flaws in the postseason they haven't remedied, like that could end up working against them. But again, you could tell me he wins, and I'm not going to be floored.
Right.
Number one on my ballot, I don't feel too good about it, but I wanted to take a little bit of a jump. I seem to be lower on the Celtics than the consensus, and so that must mean that Jayson Tatum is going to go bonkers this season. He is my first place pick. I could kind of see this being I don't want to compare it. I'm not going to compare it to when Durant won in 2013, 2014, but if you look at the season before he actually won it, where his assist total skyrocketed closer to 5 per game, and that was with him averaging 28 points per game. I could see Jayson Tatum being in like a similar territory, maybe without the 50, 40, 90 shooting slash that Kevin Durant had that season. And if the Celtics are going to be 2 or 3 in the East, that's going to add to his case. And I think it's possible for them. I would probably have Philly in front of them right now. I might even put the Raptors, but I do think it's possible. And then just the playmaking burden he has to shoulders, regardless of what happens with Kemba Walker, but even, Kemba Walker's a part of it. I think that's what we're going to see from him. And also, I don't know if I want to anticipate, but I think we need to accentuate like how actually valuable he is on defense. Yeah, Marcus Smart and Jaylen Brown might be better in a vacuum, but he is just so damn disruptive away from the ball. And he knows how to gamble without getting burned. And so he is very much a high impact two-way guy. And if you tack on extra scoring, his escape dribble three is one of the best in the league right now with, 4 to 5 assists per game. And the Celtics are 2 or 3 in the East. That to me gives him almost an airtight case for MVP.
He is absolutely going to be in the conversation. I don't know if I would have him that high just because it's tricky given Boston's depth and when Kemba Walker does eventually return, how his role is going to shift. But like, I totally get the case. I did, it's boring. It's the consensus pick. It's the betting favorite right now. But I do have Luka Doncic in my number one spot. And, as you said, when you had him a little bit lower, like we don't really know what the next evolution is going to look like, but he turns 22 in February. He's the youngest ever top 5 finisher in MVP voting, and he has further levels to reach. So if I told you that he was going to average like 32 points, 10 rebounds, and 10 assists this season, like a 32-point triple-double average, because his three ball starts finding nylon a little bit more frequently because he's no longer turning the ball over as he continues to grow accustomed to filling this high volume role. Would you blink at that? Would you believe that it's possible? Like, what if I told you that he was going to average like 35, 11, and 11? Like, are we still like pushing the limits of imagination here, or is that somehow realistic given what we've already seen in terms of how good he is and how much he's already improved? Like, it feels like unlikely, but not necessarily impossible. And I think that speaks for itself.
Yeah, the thing to stress is he already finished top 5 on the MVP ballot, the youngest player in NBA history to do so. A lot of that has to do when players started their career, but I don't really think that makes it any less impressive. So, you just kind of described a line like, what if he has James Harden's MVP season? And I don't know that like that's not, is it really outside the realm of possibility? I would say no. I mean, you even named more scoring. Like James Harden averaged 30 in his MVP season, which was 2017, 2018, right?
Yeah.
39 and 6. And like Luka Doncic is probably going to average more assists and more rebounds during that season. So yeah, that's probably a terrible comparison. It wouldn't shock me at all. The one question before we get out of here though, who's the player? And we didn't mention Lakers, by the way, and I think you're in the same boat with me that I don't think that they're going to emphasize the regular season enough. Maybe Anthony Davis senses like an opening and really goes for it, but
it's the same thing with the Clippers and with the Nets.
Yeah.
Because you could make a case for Kevin Durant, for Kyrie Irving, for Kawhi Leonard, for Paul George, for LeBron James, for Anthony Davis. But with all those, they're operating in dual star systems that are going to be either figuring things out or taking it easy during the regular season. And there are so many candidates this year who deserve consideration that I just don't feel comfortable singling out any one of them.
I will say we should probably go back and look. When's the last time that neither James Harden, LeBron James, nor Kawhi Leonard finished in the top 5?
But there's no way to pick James Harden this year.
I'm just saying.
Like, you cannot make that case right now.
Even when's the last time LeBron didn't finish in the top 5 of MVP voting?
I think it was like 2003. That would be my guess.
It was because he missed time in 2018, 2019. So actually, but when's the last time all 3 of them were out? Who's the player that you didn't put in your top 5 that would be most likely to just come to win this award?
It's Devin Booker.
Mine would be Damian Lillard, I think. But I love the faith in Devin Booker. Here for it. You know that I'm all in on the Suns this year. The Suns and the Blazers. I'm all in on them.
There's also a world in which Ja Morant is that answer.
Yeah, is it 5 years from now, maybe?
Probably, but like I don't think it's entirely inconceivable that given Jaren Jackson Jr.'s injury and indefinite estimated time of arrival here, that
to
Morant
figure out
could
this
do something.
bet for the over-under, because you're assuming that the Grizzlies are going to be good, and they're not going to be good.
I am. I'm going to keep coming back to that.
We need to figure out this bet that's coming. Do you have any more positive Knicks takes to get off your chest before we get out of here?
No. I've given 2 positive Knicks takes on this podcast, which I believe is a 2020 record, and I do not feel the need to further that.
Fair enough. Thank you all for listening. We said we were going to get out of here in this segment in under an hour. We did about an hour and 05, so we're ahead of schedule by our standards. Please, pretty please, with sugar on top, remember to rate, review, and subscribe to us on iTunes, even if you don't use iTunes. Just search Hardwood Knocks, throw us that rating, write a review. It really helps us out, so please do that. And definitely make sure that you're subscribing and downloading all of our episodes wherever you are consuming your podcasts. Until next time, we leave you with the shout-out to what is, in Adam's estimation, the 2021 NBA champion, New York Knicks.